A word here from our sponsors, which is also me, just to flag that there is a course available. The slides I'm running through today are a kind of small extract of that course. The course is designed to help people who want to run their own research, specifically startup founders and their teams, but it's not necessarily just those people. If you're working in a marketing agency or if you're working in a small business, the course could work very well for you. And the idea is to help people gain knowledge, but also crucially the confidence to go out and do their own research. So research is not it's not brain surgery, it's not all that difficult, but there are ways of doing it, and there are ways of not doing it well. And so I'm hoping to kind of help people through that process. Sorry, just letting somebody in. Hi, Catherine Ann. That's the sponsorship bit out of the way. You could find more details about that on the website if you're interested. So what we're here to do today is to talk specifically about how to find people for your market research project. For me, research is and should be fairly straightforward. I think the kind of the umbrella term of market research seems to cover lots of areas. That might be, doing kind of finding out stats and collecting data about a particular market. It might be looking at competitors. I'm talking about market research in the context of asking questions to people, which is collecting data that's helping you make decisions. So that's the kind of that's what we're going through today. Now, clearly, you can see how important people are in that process, because if you don't have people, you can't ask questions and you can't collect data, and you can't make decisions on that data. So finding people is a crucial part of the research process, but it's only a part. Okay, so it's a very important part, but it's a part in a bigger process. So this is what the course would cover in its entirety. It's me waffling on for 3 hours, I'm imparting some knowledge and tips, or I can deliver it in person, remotely or in person, however you prefer. But I think this if you are embarking on your own research, this is definitely one of the things you're going to need to contemplate is how on earth do you find people for your research. A lot of this will depend on things like objectives, which we're not going to cover today. The design of your research, how are you going to do it? You're going to do surveys, you can do interviews, focus groups. We're not going to cover that either today. What we're going to try and make it very practical. So if you are looking for people to fill in surveys or do interviews, this hopefully will give you some information, some tips on how to do that. So I think the first thing to stress or to think about is, before you start looking for people, is who exactly are you looking for? And this will just be very much determined by what the objectives of your research are. What is it the research needs to find out? And those are very much related to what the business needs, right? So if your business needs to test out a new product idea, you might want to go and talk to existing customers about a new product idea. Or if it's about you're starting to scale and you want to grow into a new market, you might want to find people from that new market or from that new segment. If in the context of kind of startups, particularly early stage startups, you may have a mailing list, you may have some followers in your network that you can go to. You may have a target audience who may or may not exist in your network. You might be building something, developing some products and services that are servicing people that are close to you in terms of your network, or it might be that they're somewhere completely different, and so finding them might be more of a challenge. You might need to go and think about collecting data from a nationally representative target. So what do I mean by that? I mean, let's say for example you wanted to measure your market size. It might be that you want to put some questions on a survey and get that collect that data from a sample which basically represent an entire market. let's say, for example, the UK. So you would have, you would make sure your sample is collected and it matches the kind of census data in terms of gender, age, location, that kind of thing. So that would be a kind of nationally representative audience. It might be that you want to focus on early adopters of a particular sector or a particular product. It might be that you want people that show particular behaviors, maybe have bought something in the last 6 months, 3 months, 1 month. It might be that you want people who have certain attitudes to believe certain things. So those are the kind of questions I think you should be asking yourself as part of the way that you design your research. Who is it that you want to include, and not, do you want to go, is it a big broad audience, is it a very narrow audience, what are the criteria? And I would often come up with a document which sets out the criteria of the people that I'm trying to find, and that would normally be shared with me, my client, and we would agree, who are the people that we're trying to find. When it comes to finding those people, I don't want to overcomplicate things, but this is, yes, Catherine, and absolutely, I'll share a copy of the deck and a recording as well by email after this. I have remembered to record this session. Last time I forgot. So in terms of finding people, I think there's sort of two things to think about. I think firstly, it might be budget. Do you have money to spend on this part of the process? Do you have some budget that you can allocate to finding people to do your research? As with most things, the more budget you have for something, the easier it will be. But it's not impossible to do this without budget. The other thing to think about is, once you've decided who it is that's you need to find for your research project, is how close are they to you? What, in terms of proximity, are they people that exist, in your network? Are they part of WhatsApp groups that you belong to? Are they on, are you connected to them on LinkedIn or other social platforms? Are they ex-colleagues or friends or family? How close are they to you? Or are they kind of an audience that you don't have much connection with? They're further away. There might be, you might be developing a product for a particular audience that you're not part of. It might be, for instance, for me, it could be first-time mums. I don't have many first-time mums in my network. I'd have to go out and try and find them some other way. So thinking about whether you've got money to spend on this and how close or far away your audience is a good way of kind of planning the process of finding people. If we look at that in more detail, so obviously it's going to be easier to find people who are closer to you. So you may have an existing customer base within your business or your startup. You may have a waiting list of people that have signed up because they're interested in your product. Those are potentially really, really good and easy and effective way, people to approach, to carry out some research with you. So you might have a mailing list, you might have a customer database, and that's very straightforward then to kind of contact people, tell them what you're doing, invite them to take part in your research. If they're further away, let's say they're kind of a target audience that's not in your network, maybe you want to include some people that use your competitors but not you. They're going to be more difficult to find. Maybe it's your next growth segment. Maybe you've kind of gone through that kind of early adopter phase and you're looking kind of early mainstream. Then those options for you are going to depend much more on how much budget you have, and that the challenge is, if you haven't got much budget, then the challenge is to think more creatively about how you approach those people. So in terms of budget, if you have, sorry, someone else just coming in. In terms of budget, if you don't have much budget, any budget, or you have a small amount of budget, thinking more creatively about how you target people will be the way to go. If the people that you need aren't in your network, aren't on your waiting list, aren't your current customers, then maybe there are other organizations that you can approach who do have those people within their network. So maybe it's trade bodies, maybe there are membership organizations out there that you could approach and somehow tap into their audiences. Maybe there are particular creators, influencers out there who have a large following of these types of people who would be open to some sort of partnership to help you with your research. Startup accelerators, you know, those people generally well connected. There might be other commercial partners available to you. So yeah, I think you need to think quite creatively about how you approach people and also how you incentivize people. It's quite typical to offer people an incentive to take part in your research. You know, in fact, the reason for that is because it's you're asking for somebody's time. That might be a few minutes to fill in a survey, or it might be, you know, an hour, half an hour, an hour and a half for an interview or a focus group or something like that. So because they're giving up their time for you, you know, they ought to be somehow recompensed, and that typically that might be cash. But obviously that builds up the amount of money that you need to invest. Other ways of doing it might be, if it's business to business particularly, then people that might be interested in maybe a summary of the findings, access to some of the data that you're collecting. Maybe that you could invite them to an event where you kind of present back some of the data, some of the findings. So providing some form of value to the people that are giving up some time for you is important. On a survey, typically you might run a prize draw for a kind of small cash prize just to kind of incentivize people, and it's to give them back something for their time, but it's also to encourage people to take part, right? So you'll find that it's more difficult to get people to give you the time that you require if you're not giving them any form of incentive. Franco, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it in, but I did this a while back. I incentivized. I said, you know, oh, I'll give you an Amazon voucher, you know, for taking part. And I was trying to get for my industry, you know, like get a gauge of where did people feel they were, and then somehow that got hacked, and then I ended up with hundreds. It went over 1,000, you know, and it was all Gmail, and they all. You know, I don't know if they got like a robot or something like to answer the quiz to try and be in there. So, yeah, that was frustrating because, you know, they nullified the research.
How did you distribute that out of interest? Was that
I sent it out. It must have been through my LinkedIn profile, you know, targeting my own contacts. But because it's access to general, I guess people just thought, oh, hang on, there's a chance for me to win. I think it was like a 50 quid voucher or something like
that. Yeah. Sounds like you ran into some trouble with some spammers. Tim's put a suggestion in the chat to use CAPTCHA, which you could weed out like people that way. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. I think that just kind of control the quality of the people that are coming through your survey is slightly off topic, but I don't mind answering that now. I think there are definitely ways of identifying people who are poor quality. They may have filled in the questionnaire too quickly. So there's often within the data that you can see the time that they started and they finished, and you can do a quick calculation. Right. And, you know, you'll be surprised. I mean, some people fill in surveys quickly anyway, but some people do it remarkably quickly. So that's an indication that they're not bona fide. And then if you put in a couple of open-ended questions, you know, and there's a thing called a red herring question, which you might put in, which is deliberately there to try and catch people out. So you'll put in a question with a very obvious answer, what's 2 + 2, and you'll give various options, and one of them will be 4. And if people don't pick the right option, then that's another reason for kind of excluding them. So I think you can legitimately remove those people if you're clear up front that you're only, people need to complete the survey properly for them to be entered into the prize draw. But yeah, that's definitely something you'd need to try and avoid in the design of the survey. I think Tim's idea there of using capture I think some survey platforms will allow you to add in a kind of I am not a robot capture element. So maybe try that next time.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So I'll quickly run through what, if you have budget, things, obviously, like anything in life, if you've got some money to throw at a problem, the problem is more easily solved. So if you were looking to run online surveys, there are lots and lots of options out there for it's a very competitive space. So it's quite it can be quite cost effective to approach a panel company and pay them a certain amount for each completion. They'll often do the scripting of the survey for you, and they'll do the kind of quality control as well. So you should only then pay for kind of quality participants, and that can range depending on how targeted, how niche that audience is you're trying to attract. That the cost of that can vary quite a lot. I have access to a marketplace where I can kind of go out to lots of different research panels, so I can get a good. You can kind of set the price that you're looking to pay, and so it can be very cost effective. If you are doing more like qualitative research, where you're doing interviews or focus groups, and you want to kind of outsource the problem of finding people, then there are specialist companies, agencies out there who that's what they do. They find people for interviews, for focus groups, and you give them you could basically give them the criteria of the people that you're looking for, be very, very, very exact in who you're looking for, down to not just demographics and location, but they must have bought this product in the last month, and they must agree with this statement, or they must feel, so you can be very, very, very specific about who you're looking for, and they will, for a fee, find somebody, find people to become your research participants. Lots of research agencies will use those kind of suppliers. Obviously, there is a cost to that. Off the top of my head, again, it depends on how niche that audience is, but you might be looking to pay £75 per person, which is a reasonable amount. Obviously, if you multiply that by 10, that's a reasonable amount of money you need to pay for your participants, but it does remove the problem of finding them, but also vetting them, making sure that they are who they say they are. The supplier will do all of that for you. Other options might be using paid media, Facebook ads to target people. I don't have much experience of that. I know there's a lot of poor data, fake accounts out there, so you need to be careful again about the quality of the people that are participating. Have some controls in place so you can identify people who aren't bona fide, who they say they are. If you have cash, then the problem sort of becomes far less. But it's not impossible. I know I worked with someone recently who was targeting a very, very particular audience, and she was looking for people in a B2B space who were responsible for commissioning consultants in the sustainability space. So that was a very, very niche kind of business to business audience, and I would say very, very difficult to find, except she put a lot of work into building a list through LinkedIn, and was able to kind of target people through LinkedIn messaging, and that was really successful in terms of converting people to take part. One of the things she offered was a copy of the results, access to the results, and I think that really worked well, because for her audience, often you can imagine people that are working in sustainability within an organization are probably often working in isolation, or they're working in a very small team. And so there was a real incentive for getting access to some data to help them to see how other people were managing it. And I think she might do an event as well where she can get people together and share some of the results. So that worked really well. So treat it a bit like a marketing campaign, I guess. How would you attract people to usual marketing skills? This particular client was a marketer, so she was very skilled at being able to kind of attract people. But I think the more time and effort you put into something, think creatively, but put some effort into building a list. It's very easy to think you can just create a survey, fire a link out, and people will fill it in, and it often doesn't work out that way. So I'm going to quickly go through some of these options, and then I'll allow a few minutes at the end if there's any questions. Otherwise, we'll finish up, roughly in about 10 minutes or so. So I've talked about some of these options already, things like your mailing list, your customer database, networks, your social media networks, using paid media or outsourcing it to a specialist. And there are pros and cons of each, which I'll just rattle through. So your customer database, your mailing list, perfect, because it's often a free source of participants. You don't have to do much really, apart from maybe write an email and invite people to take part. They're likely to respond well to an incentive. You might be able to use a discount code or a free product as an incentive, so it's not necessarily going to cost you much. It's best if they're opted in, like a marketing list. If they're opted in for marketing, thinking about GDPR, then you can obviously approach them for research. I'm not a GDPR expert. There probably are some people on the call who are, or certainly more expert than me. But in terms of legitimate interest, that is, I think, still a legitimate way to contact people, even if they haven't opted in to receive marketing from you. So you have a legitimate interest, arguably, to speak to them about your business or your idea, and so you could approach them that way. The kind of downsides are that you might not have a big enough list. Certainly for a survey, you're going to need to think about the response rate that you get. Response rates for surveys are generally fairly low. They're probably a bit higher than people that respond to advertising or direct marketing, but not much higher. I think if you're getting 5-10% response, then you're doing really, really well. So think about how many people are on your list and how many people you might get to respond. If you work on the basis of 5%, is that going to give you enough of a sample to give you some decent data? Obviously, if you're doing interviews and things, you don't need such a big sample of people, so you don't need such a big mailing list. Do the people on the list kind of represent the kind of people you need to speak to? It's not really going to work if you're designing your research for non-customers, and then you go out to customers to try and recruit people. And so in that sense, will they be able to answer all of your objectives or not? Networks, again, kind of low cost. You don't have to do, there's not much effort because you're connected to people. Again, they're likely to respond well to an incentive. That people will self-select. You don't need to kind of worry about permission if you're tapping into your existing network. And it might be worth thinking about an idea of snowballing. So if you get 1 or 2 people, you might then be able to say, I'm looking for other people who are similar to you. Can you kind of refer me to some more people, and you can kind of build your sample that way. That works really well, particularly for like interviewing, for qualitative research, where you're not looking for massive amounts of people. You might be only looking for, I don't know, 10, 12 people. So maybe you find 3 or 4, and then you use those people to find some more people who, they can help you find more people through their network. Some of the downsides, again, are you going to find enough? Do you have a good enough relationship with them for them to want to help you? Are they the right kind of people that are going to fit with your incentives? Paid ads, as I said, I haven't got much experience of doing this for research purposes. I tend not to use this. I would tend to use research panels. But again, you know, really good option if you have experience of and you know what you're doing, and you can effectively target people. Then, you know, you might be running some of your own ads anyway, so it might just be a case of adding an extra campaign onto your existing campaigns, specifically to target people for research. That would be fairly straightforward, potentially low cost, you know, quick to set up. On the other hand, can be expensive if you're not used to doing this, if there is an element of experimentation needed with all of these kind of social media platforms to get to the right audience, to get your kind of campaign running properly. So I wouldn't recommend that necessarily if you're inexperienced with that sort of thing. And you will need to think about quality control. Back to Franco's point, you will potentially get some fake accounts, some bots, you know, taking part. And then research suppliers, you know, such as myself and many others. I looked on LinkedIn the other day, there were 5,300 companies in the market research space just in the UK. So there's a lot of competition, and so you'll find somebody out there, no doubt, who is right for you. I'm happy to kind of help advise, you know, where I can. As I say, my business is focused on helping startups and founders. So what I'm trying to do is kind of deliver research in a more affordable way and a more accessible way to startups who are bootstrapped through to kind of startups who have funding. But you can go directly to a research company, a panel company, or a research agency. They can kind of take a lot of this off your shoulders and do a lot for you. Obviously, you'll need to pay them for their time. There are a number of emerging tech solutions. There's lots and lots of self-service research platforms. You probably see, you know, if you start Googling for, you know, market research surveys, you'll find that there a lot of the paid results are often these kind of self-service platforms, and they're good in terms of they're easy to use. You can do everything yourself, but I'll come on to the cost of that potentially in a moment. What else? Yeah, I mentioned recruitment services. So there are specific businesses out there who are set up purely to find people to do research. You probably haven't encountered many of those unless you've been in the research industry, but they are there. I can give you some contacts, the people that I would recommend. So yeah, the good thing about that is hassle-free. You know, you can offload a lot of the problem to people that know what they're doing, and you can be very specific about who you want to target. But clearly, it's going to be something that's going to cost money. And in just as a final thought, do be aware of some of these platforms that over-promise. You know, that promise that cheap research, cheap quality research. I'll give you an example. I won't say who it is, but you know, this platform is based on credits, and they kind of promote the fact that a credit is only 40 cents. You know, wow, that's super cheap. You know, you can get survey responses for 40 cents. You can, but the way that the model works is that a credit is one person answering one question. So if you had a survey of 10 questions and you had 10 people, that's already 100 credits. So if you had a more typical survey, maybe you're looking to collect 1,000 responses, maybe you've got 20 questions, that's 20,000 credits, and 20,000 credits is going to cost you $8,000, which in my view is way over what you should be paying for something like that, 2 to 3 times more expensive. So thank you very much for your time. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, there's my QR code. And if you have any thoughts or questions, I'll leave the space open for a few minutes. Anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question or put their hand up or put something in the chat,